Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Infinity webinar today. We appreciate you taking some of your time to join us this morning. We have an interesting topic today. I think everybody is fully aware that the trucking industry has been suffering here a little bit the last couple of years. And our focus today is going to be about training to win, how to improve your top and bottom line through training. So we're going to talk about ways to set up training that could help improve your profitability a little bit. So before I introduce our guest, let me go through a few little quick housekeeping items. Those of you that are logged in are muted, which means we can't hear you. So if you have a comment, you can jump into the chat box there and make your comment or ask a question. You can also use the Q&A box down there, and we can see those on this side, and we'll take any questions and enjoy any of the comments that you have for us. So why don't y'all just jump on the chat real quick and let us know who you are and what company you're with and where you're from, so we have some idea who's out there today. And while y'all are doing that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest today. I'm very happy to have our founder and CEO, Jay Wommack, has joined us today to talk about training to win. So Jay, it's been kind of a rough go for trucking. You got some good ideas on how to help that?
Yeah, we really do. And what's interesting is since COVID, since the fourth quarter of 2019, we've seen trucking go into a recession. Now that's a bland statement because I finally heard a well-known economist in the transportation industry say that the other day, and we've kind of known that. Now, there are certain sectors that during COVID that boomed. And if I really want to look at it from that standpoint, 20% of the industry boomed during COVID, 60% was doing their best to tread water, and 20% was on the verge of bankruptcy. And so if we really look at freight, we look at what's really happened, finally an economist acknowledged that we've been in a recession in trucking, one of the most prolonged, horrific recessions that we've seen in this industry. And when you start talking to owners and operations directors, they confirm that. As a matter of fact, some of the conversations we've had recently with companies is they really are just trying to hang on. It's like the Chinese water torture. 2008 was quick. Y2K was quick. This is dragging out. And so you really have to start taking a look at P&Ls and balance sheets and what line items really matter the most. And so that's what this is all about is rethinking how we look at our industry and how we look at our numbers. So the next slide I want to show you, most 88 to 95% of the people that see this slide do not believe that slide, that they're going to get a 4x to 10x return on their investment on every training dollar spent. And so why don't they believe that? Well, I'm going to jump into why they don't believe it. But first, I want y'all to understand where we're coming from, who we are, and why we claim to be experts in this area. Number one, Infinity was founded in 1999, and I founded this company in 1999. And it's all about training, and we've done over 170 million training sessions. And so we know a little bit about what works and what doesn't work, and how do you target the right P&L? How do you target the right line item within your company? And you use the old Tim Ferriss 80-20 rule, and that's really what works. Our mission is it really is truly, read the mission statement. I used to think mission statements were just a flaky thing to do. But the older I get, the more I realize that is our mission, is to help companies that we work with, organizations, schools, and we don't just work in transportation, we work in a number of different industries. It is to help them improve their balance sheets and improve their top and bottom line. And by doing that, that helps them survive even the worst of times. And so that really is our mission. We've done it for the last 25 years, and we delivered over 170 million training sessions. So I think we know a little bit about what we're talking about. The reason that most business owners don't believe the stat 4x to 10x on their training dollars is because they're doing four things and they're doing them wrong. Number one, they're doing surface training only. They're doing tribal training. They're doing reactive and infrequent, and they're doing long and boring. And so what should companies do to enhance their ROI? These next 3 or 4 slides I'm going to show you, if you don't do anything else, if you'll focus on these 4 things in your company, it will make a world of difference. So number one, as opposed to surface training. And what I mean by surface training is everybody has to do orientation. Every company has baseline training for every employee that comes through the door. That does not guarantee their success. So we have orientation. We make sure a driver that knows how to drive is going through orientation, or we have an employee that drives a forklift, they're going through orientation, but we don't really train to target the P&L and balance sheet for behavioral change. Now, what we do know is that most companies are not going to turn over their P&L and balance sheet to you, and you don't expect them to. What you do want them to do is start thinking about their business in a different way. So how do I target that line item that matters the most? And there are all sorts of stories I can go into about this, but let's go through the slots first. The second one is transfer to a proven process with a consistent delivery system that is trackable. Okay, most companies do tribal training. So tribal training is when you have Sally teaching Smithers what to do. And so there's no consistency. Now, Sally may have a manual that she uses to walk through, but here's what tribal training is. Sally has had a really, really good day. And here comes Smithers to come in, brand new employee, first day on the job. And Sally is training Smithers, and she's had a really great day. And so Smithers gets really good training. However, the next day, Sally is on her way to work. She has a flat tire. She's running late. Things are not as good as they were the day before. And now Sally, and y'all have all experienced this, now Sally's going to train someone new that comes in the company. They're not going to get the same training. That is called tribal training. Now, here's the key issue here. Tribal training has to be done in order to develop the right training to put into a process. You have to know what works and what doesn't work. Once you know what works, you put it into a consistent training process so that you know that the message is delivered the same way every single time. So, third one, frequent and consistent proactive training versus reactive and infrequent. So most companies, if you start talking to the insurance industry, they're going to talk to you about certain things. And they're going to say, we know that if you train at least once a month, you're going to have better results than if you don't train but once a quarter. If you train once a month, even better, train twice a month. And if you do it more frequent and consistent versus reactive and infrequent. So proactive is the key. The question I would ask y'all and put it into the chat, how much training does an employee have to change their behavior? Because really, in order for you to do more and better in target P&L and balance sheet, you're really looking for behavioral change. I mean, let's think about this from this standpoint. Frequent and consistent proactive training. I want you to imagine you have a 15-year-old son. I'm 67, so I've had a 15-year-old son. I want you to imagine, think about Beavis and Butthead. You're going to walk in on January the 1st, and you're going to say to that 15-year-old son, this year we're going to do things a little bit different. This year, I want you to make your bed, clean your room out, take the trash, feed the dog, brush your teeth, comb your hair, and I'm going to check back with you on December the 31st, and we're going to see how that went. Now, when I do this in front of a live audience, I always get chuckles and laughs right in here because everybody knows that that's just not going to happen. So on the other hand, if we go in and do frequent and consistent every week, we're going to remind them of what they're supposed to do, not long and drawn out, but every week proactively. Here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to do. The results at the end of the year are going to be much more robust. That's proven time and again on what really works. So frequent and consistent. All right. We now live in the MTV generation. What you do in your training has got to be short, short, short. Look, when I grew up, we were watching John Wayne movies, and there might be a full 1.5, 2-minute camera sitting right on you. And they're watching John Wayne for 1.5 to 2 minutes. And then all of a sudden, here comes the MTV generation. And back then, it was one cut, one edit on a video every 5 or 6 seconds. Now it's like 2 cuts a second. So you got to keep these things short and to the point versus long and boring. That's why we can look at the 15-year-old and say, we're going to have 1 to 2 or 3 minutes worth of specific direct training in order to get results that we're looking for versus one long drawn out conversation about what they're going to do all year. Do y'all remember the TV show, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Well, what we found out is most people are not. We have the attention span of a gnat. And so we have to keep it short and sweet and to the point. And that's what works nowadays, is that short and sweet and to the point. So what should we be training for beyond the basics? It's results. It is results. And the results you're looking for, you have to know what to look for. And that's why you got to start taking a look at what is that line item that matters the most. I mean, if you don't train your employees, effectively what you're doing is you're playing whack-a-mole. That always gets a laugh too in front of a live audience. You're playing whack-a-mole. So you've all been there, you're managers, you go train your people to go do X, Y, and Z, and you just assume it's being done. And as soon as you turn your attention to another area, all of a sudden the mole pops his head up and you're not doing what they were doing before. So if you are doing the proper training for results, then you're making sure that everything is put into place. It's consistent, it's short, sweet, to the point, and it's the same message delivered every time. So all of those things we just talked about, those 4 things, are critical, critical, critical. Target the line item, short and sweet and to the point, frequent and consistent. So if you do this the right way, I'm going to make a statement that a lot of lawyers would hate to hear in a courtroom. And that is, you turn your biggest liability into your greatest asset, and that is your employees. But if you don't train them and you don't have behavioral change among those employees, it will come back to affect your top bottom line and probably your cases in court as well. So one of the things that I looked at from a results standpoint is always in my history, in 67 years, whenever I've had anything go right or wrong in a company or any situation, training is always the place to fall back to. Because let's face it, one of your biggest assets is your employee base, and they can also be your biggest liability if they're not trained properly. I remember reading stories about Deming, the Wyoming consultant, and he was a guru in Japan and not here. He was out of Wyoming, and Deming, he worked in the 1980s with the Japanese. And I remember reading stories about the Japanese training their sales force 40% of the time. And I'm thinking to myself, how in the world could they do that? Well, it's the same theory as sharpen the saw. So they have to continue their training. So where do you start with doing all this? You start with a questionnaire. You've got to start with questions. You have to ask yourself. And by the way, at the end of this presentation, we're going to offer you a free questionnaire that we use when we walk in. Not only are we going to offer you the free questionnaire, we're going to offer it to you on what we call our digital checklist, which is a dynamic digital checklist, so that once you fill it out, a lot of times people fill out questionnaires and they get lost. Now you fill it out and you can have it sent to all of your employees, or you can have it sent to your management team, but it's always there. In 25 years with over 170 million plus records, we've never lost any data. So that data will be there, and you'll have to answer those. You won't have to answer those questions more than once unless you choose to review and do that. So you start with certain things like standard time to complete. One of the best operators that I knew in this industry, he was running about an 88 OR when the rest of the industry was averaging about 101 to 102. He used to spend more time pouring over standard time to complete with each of his departments than most of the managers I knew. And an 88 OR, for those of y'all that may or may not remember, anyone that's new to the industry, 88 operating ratio means that you're making about 12 cents for every dollar versus a 101 to 102. 101 to 102 means you're losing 1 to 2 cents for every dollar. So while the industry was running a 101 to 102 and losing money, he was actually making 12 cents. And these are the things that he was looking at: standard repair time, standard management time. What are the processes that you're looking at? What you can train against processes. One of our clients is in the medical industry, and they train against their processes and procedures manual because that's what they want to see done exactly the right way every single time. Otherwise, what game are they playing? They're playing whack-a-mole. which, by the way, I love to go to, when you take the grandkids to Chuck E. Cheese and you be able to go in the corner and go play whack-a-mole, that's just always fun to watch the kids' eyes light up doing that. But we don't like to play that game in business. We took a look at our own value chain, and I'll show you that story here in a second. Your P&L and balance sheets. Now, granted, you don't want to share that with the world, but there are certain line items. So really start digging in and thinking about the 80-20 rule. What line item? And I'll tell you all a few stories to kind of whet your appetite in this area. But which 80-20 rule? Which area do you start with? Is it sales, marketing? Most companies in trucking think about safety first, and safety is a big, big deal. We all know that. But I'm telling you to dig deeper into your numbers now. Take a look at your sales. I pulled up on Chat GPT, artificial intelligence, and I started asking questions. What should small to medium-sized companies be looking at in order to compete? And one of the things they talked about was sales and contracts. And if we start looking at the freight market right now, one of the clients that we had in here the other day was talking about his backhaul he's using brokers for 30% of his freight. That's still too high. During good times, companies really want to count on 2 to 3%. And during COVID, we got up to 80% on that. So what are you doing on your sales side of this to try to go get better contracts? And if you're a smaller company, what are your marketing advantages versus the bigger companies that you can go after? So every company is different. Every company has, we're generally the same on P&L and balance sheets, but every company is a little bit different in their expertise, their specialty. What about your maintenance? Remember the guy that I was talking about earlier that did the 88 OR? He poured through the time to complete on rebuilding a transmission for his maintenance department. He poured through those types of things. If he had an employee that was taking, let's say it was supposed to take 10 hours to do it, and it was taking the average employee there 12 to 13 hours, and it was standard to be 10, he would bonus the employee that was getting it done in 8.5 hours, and he would train the people that were taking 13, 14, 15 hours to do it. Those are line items that are critical to the success, particularly in a market where we've seen the price of bumpers go from $2,000 to $7,000 just in the last few years. What do you prioritize in your line item? And then another slide I didn't include on this that I got from a risk manager's presentation was first year employees. You need to overtrain first year employees because the first year employee, no matter how much training they've had, how many times they've driven a truck, they drive for XYZ for 10 years, they're accident free, they come join your company. 50% of the accidents in the first year are caused by the first year employee. Not someone who's driving a truck for the first year, not someone who's driving a forklift for the first year, not someone who's out there mopping the floors or driving the school bus or working in the warehouse. They've been doing it for 20 years. Their first year at your company, things are not normal for them. You've got to train to make sure that they are comfortable in what they're doing, because half of your accidents statistically across industries and across jobs are being caused by the brand new employees. That is critical, absolutely critical to think about. So with that in mind, I want to talk to you about one line item. And what I'm trying to do right now is make you think about your company a little bit differently. One line item. We have in our company, we have one line item. It's called the value chain. And it is a mathematical formula across the board for our boot camps. We started out years ago educating our prospects, and we do that through the form of our boot camps. And in order for our boot camps to be successful, we have to go have a list. You have to have a list. And we have to invite people from that list. The list has to be a qualified list of companies we can deal with. And we have to sign up people from that list. And so we have our ratios out there. And if we can sign up 2.5% of the people to show up in the next 12 months from our list, that'd be about 250 companies. So we looked at the next line item on our list of our value chain and how many people show up. Once somebody signs up, they have to show up. So we targeted our own show up rate. And Steve, you remember this very well, I know, because we're sitting there at 70% show up rate, which is 175 out of 250. And we targeted that one line item. and we put together a process. We hired an outside marketing firm, and we copied the Disney model of, if anyone's ever been to Disney and you signed up to go to Disney, then the first thing you start seeing is they are sending you all sorts of stuff in the mail about coming to Disney and how much fun you're going to have. And I counted, I think we got 16 different items in the mail from the time we signed up to go to Disneyland or Disney World in Florida and the time we actually showed up. So we incorporated that model into our program after we invited people, after they signed up, and we got our show up rate up to 80%. What that translated into was our closing rate at 60% was 105 at 175 versus 120 at 200. Same closing rate. Our average deal size, approximately 10, is actually a little bit more than that, but let's just say 10,000. That means we had a $150,000 difference. The lifetime value of a client for us means that one line item going from 70% to 80% changed our number by 150,000 in the first year, but over a 6.3-year period, which is our average life cycle for a client, that made a $945,000 difference in our business. Now, net present value, we'll get a CFO on the call and they'll look at it and say, well, the net present value of that is 830,000. Okay, 830,000. But the point is, when you start looking at your P&L and balance sheet and you start looking at your processes, don't overlook a process, because every process is absolutely trainable and repeatable. Now, the story here is we trained our people to all do this. And the reason we trained them and put them into the process was because we were playing whack-a-mole. We went from 70 to 80%, and then all of a sudden we started watching that number drift back down. We're doing something wrong. We're not following every step. We didn't follow every step. We didn't train properly. We were doing tribal training. We put it into a process. We put it into our system, and it's consistently delivered every time. And I don't think we've fallen below 81 or 82% in the last 3 or 4 years. So that is the value of, once you do your tribal, once you put your process into place, train against it, because that is a huge difference. I want you to think about the different line items that you're looking at right now in your own company. What is it you need to be doing? So I want to tell you a concept that is so simple, but it is profound. It's the wow factor. It is called modeling. So I almost hate to bring up fuel in the transportation industry, although we've had private carriers, private fleets that have reached out to us. They've got 14,000 trucks. They've got a fuel problem. Even today, with the price of oil dropping back down closer to the low 60s, we're still seeing fuel prices that haven't fallen back to where they should have based on the last 4 years. So we had a company, and they were concerned about their fuel. They had 1,400 vehicles. As opposed to going in and doing your standard, well, let's just look at the aerodynamics on a truck, or let's look at how what does the route mapping look like? Let's just sit down and do something common sense oriented. So I asked the company, do you keep up with fuel efficiency records? And they said, yeah, we do. I said, all I want to do is interview your 5 most fuel efficient drivers. That's all I want to do. So we did, and I'm sure we broke some laws doing this, because we let them smoke inside the room and did all sorts of things. But I wanted them to feel comfortable, and we had 5 very gruff, fuel efficient drivers, and all we did was we modeled them. We asked them all sorts of questions about, how do you drive? How do you think about driving? When do you start to brake? When do you start looking ahead to find out where you're going to make your turn? We modeled their behavior. And this is not a new concept. I learned this concept from Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins went into the military, and he took the top 5 marksmen, from Marines, Coast Guard, Army, Navy, Air Force, with pistols. And he went in and he didn't know anything about shooting a pistol. He'd never shot a pistol, according to him. And he modeled how they did it. How do they think when they're pulling it out? What are they looking at? How are they breathing? And he modeled what they were doing. So we modeled those 5 top fuel efficient drivers in that company. We rolled out 26 short, sweet, to the point video courses, 3 to 2, 3, 4 minutes each. And we played them over the next 26 weeks, 1 a week. That company, because it was specifically designed for them, improved their fuel efficiency by 13.5%. That's what I'm saying. Think about what you're doing. Think about your employee base. Think about your line items. Think about the jobs they're doing. A membership. I'll tell this story real quick. Country club. We asked them basically, they had 25 country clubs. What is your basic unit of wealth? What I mean by that is, how do you make your money? This is a simple question. How do y'all make your money? Well, we make it through memberships. We make it because people join, they pay us an upfront dues, they pay ongoing monthly dues, and once they're a member, they come in and they eat here, they play golf here, they do whatever. And I asked them a simple question. You have 25 clubs. Do you have somebody who's selling memberships that stands out above and beyond everybody else? And immediately, you could see it in their eyes. Immediately, the eyes went big and said, "Oh yeah, yeah, Sally." Y'all can tell I like to use Sally as the name of the fictitious employee out here. Sally. Oh yeah, Sally. She outsells everybody. So all they had to do was walk in and go model Sally. Sally, what do you think about? Do you give people a tour? Do you reach out to them? How do you get referrals? You went through a myriad of questions with Sally, put it in video course, short, sweet, to the point, and then deployed it to the other 24 that were out there recruiting, and had it consistently every time they had to hire somebody new, because we all know that nobody out there has turnover of employees nowadays. That also gets a chuckle too when you're in public. But I want you to think about, you're not going to have 24 employees go out and model Sally, but if you just had 3 or 4 or 5, what is the difference that would make? Well, the lifetime value of one of their members was over $70,000. So if they increased, 3 new memberships a year, not even a month, a year, look at the numbers that did for them. And then in sales, we did the same thing with our own sales department. As a matter of fact, one of my previous clients, he's since passed away. We were sitting there talking about sales, and he was in the transportation business, and he said, "Well, how do y'all use your own system?" And I said, "Well, we train our salespeople." He said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, first off, if you want to do sales, you have to have a list, you have to have a presentation, you have to go deliver the presentation, you have to do follow-up, which most companies don't want to do follow-up work. And if I look at a small company right now that's not getting their fair share of the business, they need to be focused on these 5 things. Get a good list, get a good presentation, deliver the presentation, do the follow-up work, which is where most people fail. And then you have to ask for the order. You'd be surprised how many salespeople don't ask for the order. But let's go back to follow-up, because what we did is we took our top sales guy, and internally we modeled him on his follow-up. What do you think about every day? How do you approach him? What are the 5 things that are top of mind for you when you're going out there? That changed the whole dynamics. We ended up having our best year immediately after we plugged that into place. That was our best year of sales. We plugged in his follow-up process. So don't just go, well, that's the standard things. Really take a look at your own company. And the best place to get started is with our 180 questions that we've developed. I read a book. Everybody hates it around here when I say I read a book. But I read a book several years ago called The Checklist Manifesto. And I love the book. And in that book, if any of y'all have read the book, then you'll know what I'm talking about. But the Checklist Manifesto talks about the value of a checklist. And one of the first good stories that they have in the book is talking about the B-17 bomber that we developed in World War II, and that the United States developed in World War II. And the first time it was flown, they brought in the best test pilot, and Boeing developed it. They brought in the best test pilot in the history of the United States, and they put him in the plane, and he crashed and died. And they put all these great minds around the table and said, "Oh, we have to have this airplane in order to win the war because it can deliver so many bombs. What do we do?" And they came up with a simple concept of a checklist. And once they did that, as y'all well know, 18, 19-year-old kids were flying those airplanes, and we won the war because of the B-17 bomber and other things that took place. But it was the checklist, and Boeing has been known for their checklist. In that same book, they talk about the operating room. And I know it's 2025, but this book talks about it as early as, or as late as the first decade in the 2000s, 2002, 3, 4, and 5. Operating rooms in third world countries had a higher success rate than Johns Hopkins. I want you to let that sink in. Third world country operating rooms. So they started researching why and how. They had a checklist. They went through the checklist. And one of my favorite stories of checklist is Sully. Remember when Sully landed the plane in the Hudson River? He was such a humble person. He started talking about, they quizzed him and tried to make a hero out of him. And he immediately deflected back to the crew and everybody involved. And he said, the reason it worked and the reason we were able to survive that plane crash is because the checklist had us go through and get started with everybody, the crew. The first thing we did is we humanized each other. We got to know each other because not everybody, you may not realize this, but not all pilots and co-pilots and crews work together every time. So it's many times it's strangers sitting down for the first time with each other. So they go through and, do you have children? Do you have this? So they go through their checklist. And as soon as they had an issue, number one, they had humanized each other. Number two, when they went through the checklist, when they had the engine failure, they went through the checklist. Everybody immediately knew their job and they gave credit and solely gave credit to the checklist and the crew for their success and their survival. So we developed what we call our digital checklist. And it's so powerful and it's so simple to use that I actually took our 180 questions and handed it to tech department this morning and said, how long will it take you to create the checklist to give away to these folks today that are going to be on the webinar? And he said, oh, about an hour, about an hour. So Steve, I think you have a slide where they can sign up and et cetera, and look for that. But with that in mind, this is who I am. That's my personal cell phone number. We're a successful 25-year-old company. And because if you text me, I will respond. But that is if you call me, I may not because we get so many junk calls. But if you text me, I will respond. And with that, I'll answer any questions if we have questions. And I know, Steve, you want to talk about that.
Well, I don't see any questions. If anybody's got any, feel free to type them to the chat there and or use the Q&A box or any comments that y'all have. I got to tell you, Jay, you talked about the boot camps, and I've been involved in those for a long time. And what we try to do is we have a great product. We have a great learning management system that makes all the things that you talk about really simple to deploy and a real simple way to track everything that you're doing. But you have to be willing to do it. Companies that fail, even with our technology, are not making sure that the training is taking place. It has to be done. And I think as long as you're training on a regular basis, hit and miss once in a while is never going to work. At least once a month, once every couple of weeks. My gosh, we have clients that train in some way almost every day. So I think if you want to impact behavior and have an impact on your bottom line, you've got to be focused on the training. And let's see, hang on, says, can we get a copy of this training? Absolutely. This webinar was recorded. So those of you that would like to share this with some other folks, we'll send you out a link so y'all can listen to the recording and share it with your friends. But bottom line is figure out where you're bleeding money and focus on the behaviors that can impact that with proper training, and you'll have success and be a more profitable company. That's my comments.
All right. Well, Steve, I appreciate it. I know our boot camps are always fun and well attended, and it's an education area. It's not a sales zone, although obviously we would like to have your business, but it's not a sales zone. So yeah, the questionnaire, and we will follow up. My cell phone number is 903-244-2192, 903-244-2192. And we built this company by being very, very conscious of service and safety and training and targeting P&Ls and balance sheets and line items like that. So Steve, anything else? We can wrap her up.
No, just there's a question here from Jeff wanting to know about getting a certificate for NATME points. Yeah, if you want to send me an email or let me know, be happy to get you a certificate for that. If you want it, probably best just type it in chat here real quick, and then I'll know who to get it to. But my email is steve.kessler@verticalag.com. Somebody just put it up on the chat so y'all could see that. So
Yeah,
we'll get those certificates out to you.
I remember, people, the questionnaires and things. I remember getting a marketing consulting company to come in here and they sent me wasn't 180 questions. It was an 80-page questionnaire. And it took me about a week and a half to fill it out, but I filled it out and it's, obviously I believe in the dynamic, value of checklist and the value of research and where do you target and what do you do? So,
Very good.
all right.
Well, looks like everybody's responding. Thank you, Jay. It was some great information, and everybody that's typing in, I'll make sure that everybody gets a certificate. So we'll make sure to get those out to you as soon as we can. Jay, thank you very much. If anybody else has questions or comments, feel free to reach out to our company, and we'll be glad to help you.
Steve, thank you much. Thanks for everything. Thank you all
Thanks,
for joining
everybody.
us.
All right. Bye now.